you ready when they are? Yeah, bring them in. And you want me to read the stipulation right off the bat?
There is name in the courtroom, Your Honor.
Okay. You want me to, you want? Yes. When you're ready. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You can have a seat. Sorry I can't see most of you at the moment. I will be repositioning myself when the time comes, so I'll be sitting over there nearer to you. But for the moment, were all of you able to abide by my instructions during the recess? Nobody did any independent research or looked up anything or talked about the facts of the case? All right, very good. Then in just a moment, I believe Mr. Michaels will begin his opening statement.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Your Honor, may I reposition myself?
You may.
Before I begin my opening statement, I'm going to request of the court, Your Honor, if you would please read the stipulation concerning the DNA evidence in this case on the cell phone case and screen.
All right. And ladies and gentlemen, when lawyers agree that certain facts are true, that is called a stipulation of fact. You must accept stipulated facts as having been proven. However, the significance of these facts, as with all facts, is for you to decide. In this case, the stipulated facts that you must accept as true are as follows. The state and the defense stipulate to the following facts. The iPhone belonging to Chad Oulson, which was seized by law enforcement on January 13, 2014 from inside Theater Number 10, Cobb Theater at the Grove in Wesley Chapel, was tested by Mary Pacheco of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement Biology Unit for the presence of DNA material. The testimony of Mary Pacheco would establish the following results. 1, the DNA profile obtained from the iPhone black case, Exhibit AP13, demonstrated the presence of a mixture of at least 3 individuals. Due to the complexity of the mixture obtained from the iPhone black case, this data was not interpretable. Number 2, due to the limited nature of the DNA results obtained from the iPhone's black case screen, this data is insufficient for inclusion purposes, but may be suitable for exclusion. Number 3, due to the limited nature of the results obtained, Chad Oulson can be neither included nor excluded as a contributor to the iPhone's black case screen. And number 4, Curtis Reeves is excluded as a source of the limited DNA results obtained from the iPhone's black case screen.
Thank you. Mr. Funderburk, bring up the display, please. Thank you. Okay, let's look at this. And why did I bring this up to start my opening statement? I brought this up because I want you to be able to put into context, to look at the form of the information you're getting from the prosecutor right off the bat at opening statement. What the prosecutor told you is simply not true. There is no stipulation, there is no evidence that the cell phone case or the cell phone case screen had the DNA of Chad Oulson on it. It's just not true. Let's look at this. It says, as the court read, DNA profile from the iPhone case. This is an iPhone case, black case that has a white cell phone in, a white iPhone. It's a case that has one of those screens that's kind of attached to the front for protection. So when they talk about the case, they're talking about the outside. When they're talking about the screen, they're talking about the front of the screen that a person would kind of scroll on. And so what this says is that, number one, presence of a mixture of at least 3 individuals. Due to the complexity of the mixture obtained from the iPhone black case, data was not interpretable. So based on what they got from the case, they couldn't interpret it. They have at least 3 people on it. So is it possible that if the evidence was properly preserved, that we would see Mr. Reeves's DNA, Curtis Reeves's DNA on that case as it hit him in the head? Of course it's possible. We'll never know because the way that this phone was handled was abominable. The sheriff's office didn't go in there and try to preserve it for any DNA evidence. They had a tech pick it up, manipulate the phone. Later on, they pull it out of a room again and try to turn it on to see whose it was, even though they knew who it was, who it belonged to. Due to the limited nature of DNA results obtained from the iPhone's black case screen, the front of it, this data is insufficient for inclusion purposes, but may be suitable for exclusion. Again, that doesn't tell you that Chad Oulson's DNA was on the phone. It tells you they can't tell you whose DNA was on the phone. Next page, please. Due to the limited nature of results obtained, Chad Oulson can be neither included nor excluded as a contributor to the black case screen. So what they're telling you is, not as the prosecutor told you, the evidence will show with a stipulation that, not true. That phone does not come back with Chad Oulson's DNA. We know it's his phone. His wife said, that's my husband's phone. The prosecutor and the state attorney's office and the sheriff's office, they all went in the phone. We know it's Chad Oulson's phone. But there's no DNA evidence that says his DNA was on it. It says Curtis Reeves is excluded as a source from the screen. That's all it says. So if a phone is going through the air, there are 2 sides to it, there are corners to it, the screen hits Mr. Reeves. Maybe. What if the back hits Mr. Reeves? Then certainly this isn't something that would be unusual. Not unusual. And so I bring this up to you because I think that it's important. That's only one thing. I think it's important that you realize what it is you're being told here. From off the bat, you're told there's DNA on the phone. The other thing you're told, and you're going to see photos of it this morning, he's all the way in the other row. Chad Oulson is a whole row away from Mr. Reeves. Chad Oulson is a whole seat over from Mr. Reeves. You're going to see how very close they were. The theme of the prosecutor's case is that this was over popcorn. And what the prosecutor told you going in is, well, all I have to prove is that someone was shot, somebody died as a result of that shot, and their state of mind regarding that. That's not true. What the prosecutor has to prove, what the government has to prove, what the state of Florida has to prove in this case, beyond a reasonable doubt, that this was not justifiable. And when they talk about justifiable, the prosecutor told you, frankly, that's the law of circumstances. Under the same circumstances as Curtis Reeves, knowing what he knew. You're going to decide if it's reasonable if you were trained like Curtis Reeves. You're going to decide if it's reasonable if you're 71 years old. And although the prosecutor is telling you he walked all right, he did all this and that, you're going to hear from experts. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about that, about what the realities of the aging process are and what the realities of Curtis Reeves's condition was. So the framework of what you're to decide, the state said, I'm going to ask you to come back. I can't ask you how to decide the case. You're the jury. You look at the evidence, and that evidence has to measure up beyond the exclusion of every reasonable doubt that Curtis Reeves did not act justifiably in protecting himself and protecting his wife who's sitting next to him. So since we're talking about Curtis Reeves and stepping to his shoes, let's think about that for a second. Number one, he's in a theater. The prosecutor's trying to make it seem, the same way they tried to make it seem about the DNA, that this theater is somehow lighted so you can see everything. A lighted movie theater with the previews on, imagine. They're telling you, don't believe. If somebody comes up with a description in one word, don't believe. No one can tell you what to believe and what not to believe. Their job is to put on the evidence, and you believe or don't believe. You're convinced by their evidence. Not because they're putting parameters on you, they're giving you rules. Don't believe this. If you hear one word, that's not true. Listen to the testimony, which you will. Let's talk about Mr. Reeves. All right. 27-year police veteran. Served his community for 27 years at the Tampa Police Department. Highly decorated officer. None more decorated in his years there. They thought so highly of him that at one point, the powers that be with Tampa Police Department came to Curtis Reeves and said, we want you to start a SWAT team here, which he did. A responsibility he took very seriously, because that responsibility, that is a responsibility with other people's lives, his men's lives. And so he became trained, and he trained his men. He trained his men so that every day they could come home to their family. They can go home to their family and be safe. That's the training of the man that was in the theater with his wife. He was a superstar. And when he was there, he did everything from patrol as a young man to homicide detective and everything in between. So he saw what it was like out there. He knows about danger. He knows what a fist can do to somebody as a young person or an old person. And by the way, the state's telling you, well, he's preventing great bodily harm. You're going to get a definition of that. That means something more than a bruise. It's not a bruise. That's what the judge is going to tell you. That's the law. After 27 years, the Tampa Police Department, Curtis Reeves is so highly thought of. When he retires from the police department, he gets recruited by Busch Entertainment, Busch Gardens, becomes their head of security. Now he's kind of in a job where he's dealing with the entertainment industry, the pleasure of the experience in the park industry, and he receives training for that. And you're going to see, we're going to talk about it in a little bit, some of the various courses he took. You're going to see a list of courses, and we'll talk about some of them. So throughout his years, he certainly learned how to assess a risk. He certainly knows how to spot danger. And so when he's in that theater, it's no different. That's his training and experience. That's something that you must consider before you make a decision, whether it was reasonable or not. And is this over popcorn? It is not. I'm going to show you some videos. And you're going to see that the prosecutor tries to paint this picture. They said Mr. Reeves is trying to paint a picture. By the way, he's a law officer. He should have known better. When he got arrested, he talked to them and he knew the words to use. Well, if he's a law enforcement officer, he also knows he has a Fifth Amendment right not to speak to the police. And he could remain silent and call his lawyer right away, but he didn't. So let's just talk about the fact that he's in a movie theater and they're saying it's over popcorn. You're going to see there was an attack before the popcorn was thrown. I'm going to show it to you. It wasn't just one attack, and it wasn't just popcorn being thrown. Put yourself in Mr. Reeves' seat. This is kind of a very unique situation in criminal law, because as jurors, you have to kind of put yourself in his shoes. After working at Busch Gardens, his body starts to break down a little more, continuing to break down, and he retired. Just couldn't do the job. Age caught up to him. And so he's off to retirement with his wife. Back in 2014, they were married for 47 years, his wife Vivian. They have 2 children, which you're going to hear from. Matthew, who is a police officer with Tampa, following in his father's footsteps. Jennifer Shaw, she's the daughter of Curtis and Vivian Reeves, and she has a child, their only grandchild. So Curtis and Vivian Reeves settle into retirement. They build a big house because they're hoping for a lot of grandchildren. They want to have room to entertain. And they decide to go to a movie on January the 13th, 2014. As you know, lone survivor. As he walks in, let's think about this 71-year-old man. The prosecutor's saying, well, he's 130 yards of football in the third away, football field in the third, I guess not counting the end zones, football field in a third away, and he walks there just fine. Doesn't use a cane, doesn't use a walker. You're going to hear from several witnesses. They're going to tell you about his physical condition. You're going to hear from Matthew, his son. Matthew's going to tell you about his father, a robust, vigorous man, as he sees them over the years being able to do less and less. Can't leather work, can't do woodworking, has trouble with his hands. They went on a hunting trip right before the movie, and Curtis Reeves couldn't pull back the compound bow. They were looking to getting him a crossbow. So he's seen his father deteriorate over the years. He knows that his father calls him up, Matt, I need the leaves taken off of the patio screen in the back. Jennifer, his daughter, is likewise going to testify how she's seen her father over the years deteriorate. She's seen him at one point, again, outdoors, going hunting, going fishing, camping, to a point where he can't take apart the paddles for a kayak. To the point where when he's on the floor playing with her daughter, with his granddaughter, he can't get up without help. Vivian Reeves is going to testify too. Now, she has her own health problems. She probably has ailments that are very serious. In fact, I know she has ailments that are very serious. She's going to tell you about them. She's being treated at Moffitt at the time. She had a knee replacement. Not in the greatest of shape. At any rate, she's going to tell you how she's seen the changes in her husband as well. How he needs to push himself off of the chair to get up when they're watching television. A little thing to some of us. Very important in this case. In fact, she's going to tell you that the day they were in the movie theater, the shoes that he was wearing, that Curtis Reeves was wearing, you didn't have to tie them with your hands because he had problems tying his own shoes. That little thing you pull, like you put on a preschooler, so they can tie their own shoes. You're going to hear from Dr. Donna Cohen. She's a PhD. She's a leading authority in the field of aging and the process of aging. She headed up the aging studies in University of South Florida. In fact, she started it. She's been doing it for over 50 years. She's an educator. She's going to testify as an expert. She's going to testify as an expert in the field of aging, the process of aging, and how it affects one's vulnerability. Because we can all think, well, he's walking all right, but really what's going on in his head? Police training, realization of vulnerability, it's important. We take for granted that we know about getting older. She's going to tell you scientifically, as an educator, how that works and why that works. You're going to hear from Dr. Michael Foley. He's a radiologist, a preeminent, nationally known radiologist. Why? Because the prosecutor's telling you, look at him, he can walk. You're going to see his x-rays and his MRI. And that radiologist is going to tell you about all the degenerative processes, the breaking down of his body that you can see on the x-ray. So he looks all right on the inside, on the outside, but not so good on the inside. He's got problems with his neck, his back, his shoulders, his hands, his hips, osteoporosis in his hips, all the way down. And so what does that do to an individual? Makes them more vulnerable. Also, it makes them more vulnerable to serious injury. So in that regard, you're going to hear from Dr. Bernard Adams. He's a pathologist. He used to be the medical examiner for Hillsborough County for 20 years, and now he's a pathologist on his own, and he's going to testify as an expert. The interesting thing about Dr. Adams, what he's going to do is he's going to show you on a model the most vulnerable part, starting off with the most vulnerable part of a human body is the head. So he's going to show you why it's vulnerable. He's going to tell you about older people. As you age, your brain shrinks, leaves more room in the skull, which makes you more prone to injury if you were to get a blow in the head, to the head. He's going to show you the changes in the bone structure of the neck, of the rib cage, that again make an older person, a person as they age, more vulnerable to serious bodily injury, to great bodily harm. He's going to talk about the fist as a weapon, the anatomy of it, how when you close your hand, it forms these points, your knuckles, and that becomes a dangerous weapon. You heard a little bit about what Curtis Reeves said. He got hit. He did. He has a red mark on his eye. The prosecutor's telling you somehow magically the phone flew around, this and that. Well, if it was so well lighted, you can see it on the video, why didn't everybody else see that happening? Why didn't everybody else see the popcorn grab? Because it was a dark theater. And the video, by the way, since I'm here, we're going to talk a little bit about the video. That system is not very good. It captures, it's infrared, it's motion detecting of a sort, so you're not going to see a clear video. In fact, our expert, Bruce Koenig, who again is a nationally renowned expert, he worked on the Monica Lewinsky case. They actually had him look over the JFK tapes again. He worked for the FBI, headed up their audio and visual department. He's still out there testifying as an expert. He will tell you about the resolution, how bad it is. I don't have it in front of me, so I don't want to give you the wrong numbers, but the numbers compared to what the iPhone was at the time. The iPhone had like 600 pixels, and this had like maybe 12,000, something crazy. And so you're going to see, you'll get a little piece of it today, a video that doesn't really give you good quality and doesn't show you everything. We would hope that it showed you. Let's talk about the facts of the case. You heard the prosecutor. Mr. and Mrs. Reeves, the retired couple, 71, she's 69. They go to the theater to watch a movie, a matinee. To watch a movie, to get the experience of a movie, to immerse yourself in the movie, to sit in your seats, a comfortable seat, have quiet around you, and be able to enjoy the experience of watching a movie in a movie theater. The plan is to meet their son Matthew there, the Tampa Police Department police officer. He's washing his truck, so he's a little late. He's going to meet them there. They walk in. As the prosecutor told you, it's true. That's true. They paid for his ticket. He walked in. They got a cold drink and a popcorn, which they share. Miss Vivian Reeves brings a little plastic baggie. Curtis Reeves gives her half the popcorn so they can each have their own. And they walk into the theater. Before they walk into the theater, Mrs. Reeves goes to the restroom. Now they walk into Theater 10. That's true. It is Theater 10. They walk into the theater. They're looking for 5 seats together. Why 5? Because they want to put their son together with mom and dad and have 2 seats, one on either side. And so they look, they see 5 seats together at the very back row. The very back row, as you were told, is the row that abuts what's called the Cino Bistro. There's a wall that's about 5 feet tall. Prosecutor told you about that, but an interesting fact about that wall is the chairs in the theater, they move back. They recline back slightly. Not, you can't lay down, but they recline back. With that wall behind the seat, you're not gonna get as much movement on them. So Mr. Reeves sat there. Curtis Reeves, his wife, directly in front of Curtis Reeves, already there is Nicole Oulson. Directly in front of Vivian Reeves is Chad Oulson. Now the prosecutor's telling you it's a whole row away. You'll see how close those seats are. They sit down to enjoy the movie. Curtis Reeves notices the phone is on. Yeah, he's not talking, but there's a white light. Prosecutor, there's a white light coming from the phone. We know he was on the phone. We know he was on Facebook. Doesn't matter if he was talking or not. There's a white light coming from the phone, and it's in Curtis Reeves' face. He asks him politely, would you please put the phone away? The answer he gets is, I was texting my effing daughter, do you mind? Something to that effect. Again, put yourself in the theater. You're retired. You're with your wife who's retired. You're there to have a movie experience. You ask somebody to put their phone away, and the response isn't bug off, it's none of your business, it's F off, I'm texting my daughter. And it continues, and it continues. Finally, Mr. Reeves does the right thing. He gets up. He's going to tell the manager. At this point, there is no thought that this person is going to turn into some hostile force, which happens later. At this point, it's just a loud guy who's cussing and ruining everybody's movie experience, including mine. Curtis Reeves walks down the aisle. Some people are saying he mumbled. They'll tell you, I don't know if he was telling his wife, I'll be right back. They don't know what he was saying. Some people don't hear the mumbling. Certainly he didn't kick anybody. He didn't hit anybody. You'll see the video for yourself. In fact, when I finish, I'm going to show you that part of the video. You hear from the prosecutor how he can just walk down the aisle. It's not a problem. It's really close. Watch the video. This is what you're going to see. I guarantee this is what you're going to see. As Curtis Reeves walks down the aisle, he has his hand up, and he's touching the wall for balance. You'll see him do it. He goes out to the desk, the service desk. Manager's there, a fellow named Thomas Peck. He's talking to this woman, Dawn Michelle Simpson. If the prosecutor doesn't call her, we will. She's there talking to the manager, telling him that she wants some movie posters to decorate her house or her TV room, some sort of thing like that. Mr. Reeves just waits. He doesn't interrupt her. He's not rude, and that's a testimony you can hear. You can hear the testimony from Dawn Michelle Simpson. You're going to hear the testimony from Thomas Peck that Mr. Reeves was polite and acted very nicely to please help me enjoy this movie experience I came for. Those aren't the words, but you get the idea. Mr. Reeves walks back into the theater, and I understand what the prosecutor's saying. The prosecutor's saying, well, he says in his statement that he initiated contact. Well, think about that statement. Here you have somebody who at this point is a suspect in committing a crime, not because it's a whodunit, as the prosecutor rightfully said. It should have been because the detective should have been thinking, was this a justifiable use of force? Never entered his mind. So they have Curtis Reeves sitting there, and they don't ask him these questions. They don't go back and re-interview him. So it's all right for witnesses that are going to be pro-government or say something that the state wants them to say, and you to believe them.
I would object to that. That's argumentative. It's not appropriate for us.
All right. I'll sustain. Move on.
The evidence will show that the state will present some witnesses that say things that's favorable to their side of the case. the evidence will show, and I know, because I just heard the opening statement of the prosecutor, that the prosecutor's argument is going to be that Mr. Reeves just made this statement during his interview, his voluntary interview. So you're supposed to believe one, it's what they're telling you, and then somehow not question the other, think maybe there should be more details to the other. Maybe the detective should have gotten back to Mr. Reeves and spoken to him. He was willing to do it. So what happens when Mr. Reeves gets back in, as he's coming to his seat, Chad Oulson turns around and says, "I see you turn me in." Words to that effect. Mr. Reeves at this point, seeing that Chad Oulson put his phone away, leaned forward and told him, "I'm sorry, if I knew you put your phone away, I wouldn't have gone to the management." You're going to hear from Nicole Oulson. She's going to tell you that from the first time Mr. Reeves asked Chad Oulson to put his phone away, they took it as a bossy way to ask. Why is that important? That's important because Chad Oulson gets annoyed. He was annoyed. That's what you're going to hear. That's going to be a description. Annoyed when Curtis Reeves asked him to put away his phone. But he's just not annoyed right then. He stays annoyed. Think of this. He's stewing like a pressure cooker ready to pop. Because when Mr. Reeves gets back, he's still annoyed. Mr. Oulson gets up. He turns around. This is a movie theater. He turns around in his seat and leans over his seat. Other witnesses are going to tell you that. You're going to hear from Angela Hamilton, who's the wife of the off-duty Sumter deputy. She's going to tell you she saw him lean. The deputy's going to tell you that too. You're also going to hear from Joanna Turner. Again, if the state doesn't call her, we will. She's going to tell you she sees a throwing motion. And I'm going to show you this morning that part of the video. So you can see that there's a throwing motion. There's a throwing motion, and then about 10 seconds later, this is still going on. Nicole Oulson is trying to hold her husband back. I mean, think about this. You're going to see Nicole Oulson. Her left hand was on Chad Oulson's chest. My arms are long. Hers are not. You'll be able to see it. The evidence will show that her arms are short. And so we can only imagine that Chad Oulson had to be on top of her, right? She's in her chair, coming over towards Curtis Reeves. Again, I'm going to show you some video this morning. You're going to see that. So this isn't about popcorn. And how do we know that? We know that because we're going to present a use of force expert, Roy Bedard, an expert that testified for the state. In fact, this very office not too long ago, this prosecutor's office. And he's going to tell you that it's impossible that Curtis Reeves discharges firearm in response to popcorn. The times just don't add up. It happens so quickly that nobody humanly possible could have fired in response to throwing popcorn. Prosecutor told you, well, you're going to hear that somebody said, "Throw popcorn at me, will you?" You know what Nicole Oulson's going to tell you today? After the shooting, Curtis Reeves didn't say anything. So who knows if this is some kind of faulty shared recollection? And let's talk about that. Prosecutor's right. They had over, Pasco County Sheriff's Office had over, I would say 80 and 90 officers that went there. Everything from school resource officers to agricultural officers. They had officers from departments I frankly had never heard of. They were all there. Yet we're supposed to believe that they were all there, but somehow they didn't hand the witness statements. Witness statements are essentially the police go there and they say, "Here, I'm going to give you a witness statement. Write down, tell me what happened. something to that effect, very general. What they're supposed to do is if two people are together, they say, okay, I want you separated, you go over here, you go over there, because I don't want the witness statements contaminated. Officer after officer will get up there and tell you that. Our expert in crime reconstruction will tell you the same thing, Michael Knox. He'll say it's rule number one, learn it in the academy. As a rookie, you know to separate people. So you have 90 police officers, 70, 50, whatever the number is, there aren't just two, and they let everybody congregate, and they let everybody fill out things together. Two of the forms that were filled out by a couple were the exact same. The wife filled them out for both of them. So if somebody says, well, he said throw popcorn at me, is that something that you can really believe? So Mr. Reeves turns after speaking to the manager. Things happen really fast after that. Nicole Oulson will tell you, it happened fast. It happened fast. I'm not sure if I was standing up or sitting down. I think I was trying to get up. That's happening fast for Curtis Reeves, and for your consideration, that's happening fast for you. Again, Nicole describes her husband and his words as agitated, as mad, as angry. Other people in the theater will say the same thing. In fact, today I think you're probably going to hear from Hamilton, Mrs. Hamilton, Angela, who is the wife of the police officer who was there off duty, and you're going to hear from her that he sounded agitated. Other witnesses are going to tell you the same thing. One witness, I think his name is Alan Wolf, is going to say, I thought from what I heard, and I only heard one of them, from what I heard, I thought a fight was going to happen. He said he only heard from one of them. Nicole Oulson will tell you that her husband was the louder of the two. She was right there. Curtis Reeves has a gun in the movie theater. Well, guess what? Curtis Reeves has the right to carry that gun. In fact, under the Law Enforcement Officer Safety Act, enacted by the United States Congress, not only does he have a right to carry a gun, he's encouraged to carry a gun. Why? He's encouraged to carry a gun because if you're a police officer, you might not remember some bad guy that you put in prison, but guess what? That bad guy remembers you. And so you're encouraged, as retired law enforcement, to carry your firearm. The off-duty police officer in Sumter, he had his gun with him too. Didn't have it on him. His wife had it in her purse. She didn't have a license, but at any rate, he did have it with him in some fashion. So he had a right to carry a gun. He was encouraged by law to carry that gun, Curtis Reeves was. After the shooting, what did Curtis Reeves do? Took the gun, put it on his lap, on his knee. That's where it was retrieved by the off-duty officer. In the meantime, people see Curtis rubbing his head, adjusting his glasses. You're going to hear various accounts of that. Police come in, handcuff him, take him out. In the meantime, Curtis is concerned. He's concerned that somebody's going to get hurt. He knows that when these sort of calls come out to law enforcement, when they hear there's a shooting in the theater, they're coming in, I guess, hot would be a term. They're coming in thinking something might be happening here. And so he's concerned for his wife to move over. His son comes and gets his wife and takes her out of there. And she is interviewed, Vivian Reeves. When police interviewed the off-duty Sumter, they interviewed the wife with the husband present. Not the best technique, I'm sure it was for human purposes, but it just doesn't help the investigation. Let's talk about the little bit about the investigation. Number one, you already know that these individuals were just given these slips to fill out and willy-nilly just let go. They weren't separated until a while later. That's not good. The detective who arrested Mr. Reeves, he arrested him before he went into the theater. Before he went into the theater. Here's something else. There's a video. We all know it. We've talked about the video. Well, guess what? That detective didn't even go to look at the video. Imagine that. Police work 101. Robbery at a 7-Eleven. I'm going to go ask the guy behind the desk, is there a video? Shooting in a movie theater. Maybe consider whether it's justifiable use of force. Let me see what I can see on this thing. Doesn't look at the video. What happens to the video? That's interesting. What happens to that video is in the middle of the night, corporate. The owners of the Cobb Theater sent somebody at the middle of the night to take those hard drives away to Alabama. And when the Pasco County Sheriff's Office finally realizes that this is probably something they should have and look at, days later, they go to where? Corporate? No. They go to a lawyer's office in Alabama to pick up these hard drives. And then guess what happens to the equipment? It gets dismantled. And why is that important? Because there's going to be an issue in this case regarding, you're going to see in these videos, as crummy as there are, there's something that looks like a light. It happens about the time when Curtis Reeves got hit by a cell phone, got punched, something happened. We know for sure that the cell phone was found between Curtis Reeves' feet. That we know for sure. We have a photograph of that, and everybody agrees with that. So how did it get there? Well, the video seems to show that, but it's not really clear. And so what we did is we got Michael Knox, went to the theater at 2 in the morning. We tried to recreate it. The problem was that we brought the shoes to see if we could do something with that. The problem was that the whole system had been dismantled. So we couldn't conduct any sort of investigation to be able to either rule out or rule in what that reflection was. Curtis Reeves did have a reflection on his shoe. You're going to see that. We know he does. You're going to see it flat. It looks like it pops up on the screen. There are all kinds of weird little white spots and all of that. Like I said, it's not the finest of videos. But even if it is his foot, then is that he crosses his leg? Because, by the way, this is very important, and I almost forgot it. When Curtis Reeves comes back from speaking to the manager, he comes in, reaches down, gets his popcorn from his wife, Vivian, puts it in his left hand, and crosses his legs. So is that somebody that's really engaging somebody again? Is that somebody that's saying, ha ha? Is that somebody that's there to rub it in? Or is that somebody there that's just trying to enjoy the movie and apologize and say sorry? Because that's what happens. You can see that on the video. Okay, the state told you there's a lot of witnesses. They may not call some. There's some crucial witnesses, some vital witnesses you need to hear from. If they don't call them, we will. You'll hear from them because you need to hear from them. Now let's look at some of these visual aids I have to kind of illustrate what I've been talking to you, if we can. Your Honor? Thank you. File one, please, Mr. Funderburk. These are some of the certificates of training that Mr. Reeves collected over his many years. 328 hours of training in the police academy, 328 hours. Florida Institute for Law Enforcement certificate. Department of the Army certificate of training for the Tampa Police Department. State of Florida Police Standards certificate of recognition. FBI certificate of attendance, Special Tactical Firearms School. Survival tactics. Next page, please. Tampa Police Academy, advanced training, inspector techniques, so that he can train his men, so that he can ensure their safety, so they can come home to their family. FBI training school, effective communication. Commission on Criminal Justice training. Department of Justice, standard and training. His training is not just local, it's not just state, it's nationwide. It's federal and it's local. Next page, please, Mr. Funderburk. These are some of the training he received when he was with Bush Entertainment. Because now, although you're applying the principles of your law enforcement training of 27 years, and you're training people in law enforcement for 27 years, you're looking at it from the perspective of the enjoyment of an experience, like being in the movies, right? Okay. Let's go with number 2, please. Ready? All right. Let's see inside the movie theater. The cameras are somewhere back here, up here high. I think they're 30 feet up. And they are facing down, but they capture the first few rows. Mr. Curtis Reeves and Vivian Reeves are somewhere around here. Chad and Nicole Oulson, Mr. and Mrs. Oulson are somewhere here. You have Mr. and Mrs. Reeves are in these 2 seats here. You have the Hamiltons you're going to hear about, they're out here. And the Turners that I talked to you about, they're over here on the same row. And by the way, Angela Hamilton, even though she was 7 to 9 seats away, still could hear Chad Oulson's voice over the previews. So the prosecutor's telling you, number one, they're a whole row away. They're a whole seat away. As if to create the illusion that they are an ocean apart, or at least very far apart. Not true. Line 3. Ready? It's that stipulation the state told you about, an agreement that Chad was not texting his effing daughter, as he said, but instead downloading images, content associated with Facebook, linked to Facebook, profootballmock.com, a missed call around that time. So, it wasn't true what Chad Oulson said. Is that part of just being angry? Number 4, please. Ready? before we, don't start it yet. Before we watch this video, let me tell you a little bit about it. There's several cameras. This camera that you're looking at here is kind of the front as you're walking into the area where the theaters are, past the concession stands and all of that. There's another camera at the front desk where you actually pay. Those are in color. What you're gonna see in the theater is not this. And that's just because the difference in lighting and the difference in cameras. The other thing you're gonna see when we get to the part inside the theater, there are going to be several black frames. What happens is, with these surveillance type of videos, and our expert, Bruce Koenig, the FBI, former head of the FBI audiovisual department I talked to you about, is going to tell you how that works. The way it works is, when you watch a surveillance video, like a home surveillance video, in this case, it's in a theater, you look at it, it appears that something is constantly happening. What happens in these motion-activated videos is that when the recorder actually stops recording so that it's more pleasing to the eye, it'll continue the same images. The same images, same image, same image, until something else happens. What these videos do is take away the images where the camera is not recording. And so what you're going to see, there are going to be large gaps, because that's what the camera was actually recording at the time. Go ahead, Matt. Mr. Reeves, Mrs. Reeves. Okay. Pause it, please. Okay, walking into the theater. You can see they're taking their seats along the back row. This is the Sino Bistro area we talked about over here. There are two cameras you can see. One obviously is recording from this side. The other one is recording from over here somewhere, and that's this, what's called the camera 12 recording. This black screen here, this is what I talked to you about. So what's interesting about this is, you would think that if one camera is sensing action, is sensing movement, that both cameras would. But as you can see, that's not the case. And how they work exactly, no one knows. They took the cameras. The hardware, they took the drives, and I mean, this is what we have. And so you will see, this is what you'll be seeing. This is the timestamp at the bottom. So you'll see actually how long things take to happen. So Curtis Reeves, Vivian Reeves come in. What is that? The answer is, don't know. Could be his popcorn. Why is it shiny? Poor resolution. Don't know. That's what the camera picked up. And so that's Mr. Reeves sitting down. Curtis Reeves, Vivian Reeves. 13, 14, 47. They go down into the thousandths of a second. Okay, let's go forward a little bit, please. Mr. Funderburk. Sit down. Popcorn in his left hand. Okay, let's move forward a little bit. We're skipping parts of it because nothing's happening. You'll be able to see the whole thing with all the black screens. This tells you obviously when the next image will be appearing for camera 12 and camera 11 respectively, I should say. Okay. Okay, Mr. Reeves leaning forward, getting up. Now this is when he's going to see the manager. All right, let's stop it, please. Go back a little bit, Mr. Funderburk. Okay, let's let it run there. All right, hold on, stop. All right, putting down his popcorn. Go ahead. Stop. Back a little bit. He's using the wall for his balance. That's not what the prosecutor told you. The prosecutor told you just zips down the aisle. Try to make it seem that way anyway. I know he didn't say that.
Your Honor, I haven't, this is argument. This isn't what you're going to see. He's pitting one against the other. It's not proper for opening. This is pure argument.
I'll rephrase,
I
Your
object
Honor.
to it.
I'll rephrase. What the evidence will show, not what was represented to you by the prosecutor, the evidence will show that Mr. Reeves did not walk down the aisle with any ease. The evidence will show that Mr. Reeves used the wall for balance. Go ahead, Mr. Funderburk. Here he is leaving. Mr. Reeves going to the service desk. Okay, let's pause it, please. All right. Thomas Peck, manager, service desk. Dawn Michelle Simpson. Those are the players. You're going to hear from them. Both of them are saying, and will say, because it's the truth, that when Mr. Reeves comes,
Your Honor,
Thomas Peck is going to say that Mr. Reeves was calm. The evidence will show that Dawn Michelle Simpson will say the same thing. You can make up your mind to see if it's consistent, because the judge is going to tell you that you can judge the credibility of a witness to see if their statement matches up with another's. That's your decision to make. They're both going to say the same thing. Continue, please, Mr. Funderburk. Here's Mr. Reeves at the desk, waiting his turn. Waiting for Ms. Simpson to write down the movie posters she's looking for. Back into Theater 10. Sitting in his seat. Got his popcorn in his left hand. Okay, stop there, please. Let's go to, if you would please, file number 6. What you saw very briefly on this camera is isolated because a video is just a series, like a movie is, of frames. These are the frames that are within this video. Okay, Mr. Funderburk, if you would toggle forward, please. Okay, hold on. Chad Oulson. Chad Oulson coming over his chair. That's not the popcorn. That happens shortly. So although the argument is, or was made, that the evidence will show this is over popcorn, the evidence will show that this is a first attack. Mr. Reeves is back in his seat, popcorn in his hand, getting ready to enjoy the movie. Explosion. This is what happens. Go ahead. Back and forth, please. Okay. Here's that. That's that shiny thing. Is that the cell phone? We have no way to prove it. We have no way to prove it because, frankly, the theater did what they did by moving things around. And so we can't prove it. But certainly, we can see, please, Mr. Funderburk. Is that the reflection on his shoe? That's for you to decide. I can't tell you what it is, and nobody can. But clearly,
Your Honor, I object. This goes beyond opening statement.
the evidence will show that Chad Oulson, I'm sorry, Your Honor, I didn't give you a chance to rule.
Sustained.
Okay. The evidence will show that Chad Oulson didn't just talk to Mr. Reeves and didn't just reach over the seat. The evidence will show this, that Chad Oulson at 13, 26, 25, 422 came over his seat to the extent that his head and his arm appear to be in the road. They're in the road. One more time, please, Mr. Funderburk, for us. Okay, thank you. Let's go back to number 4, please, Mr. Funderburk. Okay, go ahead, please. Okay. Let's go to, if we could, please, let's go to file 8. All right. Was it over popcorn? It's your decision. The evidence will show that it happened mighty fast. It happened lightning quick. These individual photos strung together will put you in the place of Curtis Reeves, because you'll be able to see what he saw. Did he see somebody who announced, "I'm going to take your popcorn"? There's going to be no evidence of that. Did he know that Chad Oulson was going to take his popcorn? He's a man. He's got popcorn in his lap. Prosecutor talked about the evidence will show that Curtis Reeves invaded Mr. Oulson's space. We've already had one invasion of space, if you will, after a violent outburst. Now we have
This is inappropriate for opening argument.
the evidence will show that there's already been one violent outburst. And this is the second. Is that Mr. Funderburk? Okay. Step 1. Chad Oulson. His arm coming across. Stop it. Again. It certainly appears to be a head and an arm coming across. You make that decision.
Is there an objection?
Yes, Your Honor. It's one thing to say what the facts are, but he's interjecting his own personal opinions in an opening statement. It's not appropriate.
Let's stick to opening statements.
Okay.
What's his name?
Let's do it this way. You're Curtis Reeves, you're sitting there. You don't see someone taking your popcorn all at once. The evidence will show that you don't. Mr. Reeves will say that he didn't know there was popcorn being thrown. He didn't know there was popcorn being taken. Go ahead, Mr. Funderburk, if you would. Now look at this. Okay, stop, please. We have another motion, right? Motion appears to be the arm.
Your Honor, again, I object. These personal interjections of his personal assessment of the video is not appropriate in opening statement.
Let's discuss this at the bench. Mr. Michaels, the jurors have indicated that they'd like to see the screen a little closer.
Okay.
I don't think that's a problem.
No, Your Honor.
I think we can do that.
Watch the extensions. My stuff is plugged into it.
No, we got a little more.
You could pull it a little more.
Go a little more. Mr. Funderburg, let's go back to number 6, please. Okay, you're about to see again that sequence of events that happened before this last part that you watched involving the grabbing of Barthle. Go ahead, Mr. Funderburg. Go ahead. One more time, please.
Your Honor, I would object. If the purpose of opening arguments is just to put forth facts that the defense anticipates will be shown during the course of the trial, to repeatedly show a video, it goes beyond the scope of opening arguments.
Okay. Well, the defense anticipates that this will be shown at trial. The defense anticipates that you will see this several times during trial. Mr. Funderburg, let's go please back to number 8. Go ahead. One more time, please. Okay, thank you. Let's go to the final image, if you would. File number 9, please. Before we get to file number 9, let me talk to you a little bit about that first attack that you saw. During that first attack, you want to know if anybody else saw it. Well, somebody else in the theater did. Joanna Turner. She's the lady that's sitting to Vivian and Curtis Reeves' right. She's there with her husband watching the movie, and what she describes is she sees Chad Oulson stand up, turn around in his seat. By the way, Nicole will tell you that the seat popped up. Those are the type of seats that popped up. And you decide if that makes it easier or not for somebody to get to the person in the row behind them. Joanna Turner describes seeing Chad Oulson make a throwing motion. And it appeared that he had something in his hand. She thought it might have been a thermos, but it was something dark in his hand. Is number 9 ready to go, Mr. Funderburg? Yes. That's a photograph from after. Curtis Reeves, his seat. Vivian Reeves, his seat. Chad Oulson's seat. Nicole Oulson's seat. Chad Oulson's phone. Thank you, that's all I have with the board, Your Honor.
Did I move that, Your Honor?
If you can,
Yes. Yes, I will.
Hold on, let's unplug it.
Don't unplug it yet. I'm good.
That'll work. Perfect. Thank you.
Like I said, if they're witnesses the state doesn't put on, that they've listed, we're gonna call them so that you can get the whole story. I can't tell you to vote guilty or not guilty. You're the jury. You know what your job is. The prosecutor doesn't have to prove homicide here. They have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it was not justifiable use of force. They have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Reeves, knowing what he knew, being in that circumstance, beyond a reasonable doubt that he didn't act reasonably, that he wasn't justified. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached a good time to take a lunch break. I'll instruct you once again to remember my instructions during the recess. Don't do any independent research. Don't discuss the facts of your case amongst yourselves or with anyone else. And don't do any independent research. During the recess, typically, I instruct you to keep your badges on. I'm going to allow you to take your handsome badges off during the break. When you're out and about, if you go out elsewhere to get lunch, should anyone be talking about the case in your presence unknowingly, if you're waiting in line for fast food or sitting at a table, or either tell them that you're on the case, that you're a juror on the case, and please don't talk about it, or move away out of earshot, and let me know what if something happened. Okay? Any questions? All right, I'm going to let you go till 1:30. Please report back to the jury pool room at that time, and remember my instructions, and we'll get started shortly thereafter. Thank you.